first things first. Probably every single app that we build these days, we use APIs, right? These APIs will fail. That's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. They will fail because that's just, physics. You connect to something on a network, something you don't own. Well, they can fail due to issues on network, DNS, connectivity, resources, whatever. So best assume they will fail. What can you do about it? Well, the one thing is assume that they will fail and build your app in resilient way so that it can deal with these issues and will not fail miserably, right? It will not lose the data of the customers who use your app. The most important part is like you don't own these APIs. So how do you test that your app will not miserably break? Because again, like how can you force failure, for example, on Microsoft Graph or any other API in a cloud? You can, because again, you don't own them. And it's not like you can call us at Microsoft and say, hey, like guys, I'm testing my app. Could you please fail it like for an hour or so that I can test my code? Like it doesn't work that way, right? So you need to have a way that you can simulate errors and different behaviors of cloud APIs. And that is exactly what Microsoft 365 Developer Proxy allows you to do, right? So think of it like, what is it? Think Fiddler, but then intelligent, right? So it's not only meant to allow you to inspect what's going over the wire, but it also triggers behaviors on APIs that you use in your app so that you can test different conditions that will occur eventually when you launch your app, right? So two goals that it has is one, to help you build better apps. The customers and the users of your app will appreciate it. Two, it also speeds up the development, and you will see exactly why. So first things first, right? It is a command line tool that you run. I am on a Mac, but it works exactly the same way on Windows or in Linux, right? So when you start it, let's start it with that, and let me also immediately say that I want to fail every single call it goes through because, like, for a demo that is cool. Like, we don't want to wait. We want to see every single call fail, right? So the first things first, we talked about cloud APIs failing. Right. So one thing that you can do with the proxy is introduce chaos to your app. And what's really cool, you don't need to change anything about your app. And it works with any type of app. It works with PowerShell, .NET, JavaScript, whatever platform you've got, whatever type of app you've got, because it is a proxy and it works on the network stack, right? So it basically looks at the requests that go over the wire, and it's not really looking at whether it's coming from a TypeScript code or JavaScript code or whatever. So that makes it really, really cool and really easy to use, right? So to make things really clear, let me show you basically the demos on curl, but it works exactly the same way on any kind of web request that you issue from your app. Okay, so cool. Let's say we want to see like how. Like, imagine we want to call Graph. We want to see how it would help us simulate issues on Graph. So let's say here I'm going to call Graph to get info about me as a user, and I want to route this call through a proxy. And here we go. I simulate now a 503 error. Like, the actual Graph works. This call has never reached Graph. Proxy, being kind of the middleman between my app, curl in this case, and the cloud, introduces this error, allowing me to test my code against this error. If I call it again, I will get another one, right? Because right now, I will get a 504, right? So right now, proxy is used in a mode that is going to introduce random errors. And that's really cool because I can test different edge cases that, again, will happen eventually. It's just a matter of when, not if. So again, you need to secure your code against that. Right, so that is like one way to use it, but it's not just the only thing, right? Like, the Microsoft 365 Developer Proxy does a number of things. Another cool thing is that it allows you to test if your app uses minimal scopes that it needs for the things that it needs to do. Right? Because one of the things that we see time and again is that developers ask for more permissions than they need. And that isn't weird per se, because, like, if you think about it, how do you build your app? Well, you start with one API call, then you add another one, add another one, and for each of those, like you go to our docs, you get the info about the scopes that you need, and you just add them to your app. But who's to say that for the collection of API calls that you use in your app, maybe there's a smaller scope or smaller set of scopes that you could use to access them, right? But it's really hard now to, like, every single time you add an API call, to go through your whole app, all API calls, and then see, do I use the minimal scopes or not? You can do it way easier with the Microsoft 365 Developer Proxy, and let me show you exactly how. So first, let me see if that is enabled. Let me go to Proxy and let me go to its config. I think I've already have it enabled here. Right, so Proxy has a config file where you can basically pick and choose which features you want to use. So here you see all the list of all the different things that you can use, and we are specifically interested in one named Minimal Permissions Guidance Plugin. It is a mouthful, but it does some really cool stuff. So we can see that it's enabled. Let's run it in practice and let's see how it works. So again, we go back to Proxy. We want to fail everything. That part isn't really relevant to us. But let's do that. Let's start the recording. This important part. We want to keep track of all the different calls that we issue to Graph. And then also, another thing that I have to do, I need to get an access token. Do I need to add access token? Yes, I need to have an access token because, again, I want to see, is my access token properly scoped for the different APIs that I want to use, or does it have more? So in this case, let me get access token from the CLI from Microsoft 365 and store it in a variable. 321, it should be there. All right, and I can verify that it's there. It will be a really long string. Perfect, it's there. And now let me call Microsoft Graph with a token. So let me do exactly the same call to me. 321, okay, it will fail, that is irrelevant. And let me do another one to users. All right, so now we issue two calls to Microsoft Graph, to /me and to users. Let's see if the access token that we got was properly scoped for these two calls. So now if we stop the recording, now we will see evaluating delegated permissions for me and the users. Apparently the minimal scopes that I need for these two calls is user basic all. Check out this. These are all the different scopes that I've got on my token. That's a lot, isn't it? Here's the list of all scopes that I don't need on a token. How cool is that, right? So in just a second, all I had to do was to click through my app. Imagine that, right? Click through my app to use the different parts of the app. Have Proxy record these calls, and then just in a second tell me, am I using the right scopes, the minimal scopes, or not? And that is a super valuable thing to do because, again, in a second, it allows you to make your app more robust and avoid requesting unnecessary scopes, right? Everybody loves that, right? So that is really cool because it doesn't come at a cost of, tremendous effort that you have to do every day as you build your app, right? So these are two things that I think are really, really cool. So with that, I hope that you have a good idea of what Microsoft 365 Developer Proxy is. One, it allows you to simulate different types of behavior on cloud APIs, and it's any API. In this case, you've seen Microsoft Graph, but we can emulate any API, GitHub API, recent API, any cloud, or even your own APIs that you build, right? We can simulate any API. So one, simulate behaviors and APIs, and two, get contextual guidance for the different things that you do. So these are really cool things to have available in Toolbox. Just the other week, we released version 0.12 with some new abilities, and there are a few things that I'd like to show you in practice, right? So first one, and that is exactly why we are in Microsoft Graph connector. So one is the ability, and there's also the ability that you've got in Proxy to mock a response. Like you call an API endpoint and you always want to have the same response back. And that is invaluable if you do things like tests, if you also do a demo on things that is based on time-sensitive stuff. So imagine that you want to that you build an app that shows the files user recently used. Well, in order for you to have the data, somebody needs to go and use the files every single time you're doing a demo. That doesn't really sound efficient, right? What's really cool is that with the mocks that you put in proxy, you can emulate that, right? So you can say like every single time the app is going to try to get the data about files that have been used, just give this thing back. So you can do the work once, click once, record all these calls, get them in proxy, and then from that point on, you can just use the mocks back. And they have exactly the same shape as the real data you would get from the Microsoft Graph or any other API. So that makes it not really efficient to prepare the demos, but also to develop. Because then again, like it's not like everybody on the team will need to do their own, clicking around, generating the activity just to be able to have the data back, right? So that is really cool. Now, the caveat is sometimes you want to call the same URL 2 or 3 times and get a different response back. And one case of that is when you create a connector, right? And for it, you create a schema. That is a long-running operation, right? So you create a schema and you get back a URL with operation that or a URL that allows you to check the status of the operation. And it's like for a few times, it's going to be in progress, in progress, in progress. And at some point, it will be done. And if you build an app, if you build code that does that, you might want to emulate that, right? So let's see how that works. I've got here a mock that basically illustrates that in practice, right? So here I've got a call to create a connection. Here is the call that I've got. Let me rep the lines to make it easier to read. Here is exactly the call that I mentioned, right? I create a schema for a connection. And in here, I'm getting back a response with the URL. Call this URL to get the state of creating schema. And the first time I'm going to call it is going to be in progress. It's going to be in progress, but at some point, and it's the same URL, but at some point I want it to be done. Because I have piece of code that needs to go through that part. So that's the cool thing that now from v0.12, we can now emulate it. So we can say with this and attribute here, we can say the second time you call the same URL, return the response that you've got here as opposed to here. Let's see this in action. So let me start proxy with mocks file Microsoft Graph Connector JSON. And just to make it easy, let me split screen again, and let me just call directly the operation here. Because there is no need for us to call all of these URLs. So I want to do curl. I want to route it. I don't need an access token because it's going to be mocked anyway. So this, right? So the first call we get back the response in progress. Now we're going to do another call and complete it. There you go, right? So this matches exactly the same thing. We haven't changed anything about the URL, but now we have the ability to mock nth call, second, third, fourth, whatever you want it to be, to have basically the different response on the same API call. And that gives you a lot of abilities to simulate different behaviors on the APIs, right? Another thing that I want you to see is the latency. Oftentimes, that the APIs that we use, again, they're in the cloud, right? So you cannot really tell how efficiently will they work. Sometimes they are blazing fast. Sometimes, for a reason, they are painfully slow, right? And the challenge is you need to do something about it, because if you always assume that they are blazing fast, well, you might build an app like the one that I've got here. Let me start a local app here. And you will see that in practice how it all works. So let me quickly show you that. There you go. I need a browser, but not this browser. I need another browser. It will be on your screen in 3, 2, 1. Let me just grab the right window. All right, cool. I've got it here. Let me grab this URL. All right. And let's have a look at this app, right? So this is an app that we've built that shows some info about the user. It works. It works perfectly fine. You could even say this app is ready to be shipped, right? Or is it though? Let's see how this app would work if the API turned out to be slow. So let's go back to proxy config. And let me, in the config, enable a new plugin that we've just introduced named latency. So let me just, for clarity, turn off everything else and just enable the latency here. And let's make latency really slow. So we wanted to make it between second and 10 seconds on every API call. All right. So here, if we go back to proxy, let's restart it. Proxy, and let's don't fail any calls. We want all calls to pass through to the API. Just wait a little on every call, right? So with that, proxy is on. Let me now start Chrome, which is attached to proxy, so that I will not intercept all of the calls on my box, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to be in this call, right? And now pay attention to what you will see. So on the left-hand side, you will see all these calls coming through proxy, but the most important part is pay attention to the screen. Why? Because for a long time, you will not see anything. This is the worst demo ever. Why? Because you will not see anything. You will, there you go. You can see the calls going on here. Nothing's going on. Is this thing still on? And you will see here, well, it's going to wait for 7 seconds. And now there are some more calls, and they will wait for 6 seconds and 4. And the app is still not communicating anything. It's like you are talking to somebody and they're just not reacting to you, right? And it will work eventually. But now imagine how badly this app is built. It's not telling the user anything. And now it's tangible. You can see this in action, and you can see this on any API that you use in your app. You can emulate that. And the cool thing is that you can do it for your backend code, front-end code. You can simulate it on any type of app, right? So with that, it gives you more abilities than only the dev tools you've got in browser, which only work with a web app. But if you have a server-side code, well, you wouldn't be able to emulate that quite, right? So with this, you've got the ability to emulate any API call, no matter if it's front-end, back-end, no matter which shape, and basically unravel these spots in your app that are just blank and don't tell the user anything. So this is, again, a great addition, new addition that we've added. And then the final thing that I wanted to show you is, like, we already talked a bit about mocks, right? So the cool thing is that with mocks, you've got the ability to create predictable responses for API calls. And that is great for demo, development, simulating things. But does that mean that you need to, type all of them by hand? Because, like, they aren't small. Like, if you look at them, how they look like, I think we've seen one here. Well, you need to type all of this, like which URL, method, response body, and all of that. So do you need to build it by yourself? Well, in this version, we thought that, you know what, we've got a better way. What if you could record activity in your app? And based on that, we create the mocks for you so that you don't need to type. You just need to click or run your app. So let's see that in action. Let me go back to proxy. And let me enable the mock generator plugin again that we introduced. So let me disable latency. And let me go here and enable the mock generator plugin. Let me enable that. Let me restart proxy. And again, let's not fail anything, because in this case, we want the calls to come through so that we get the actually the response from the API, right? So that we can get the data that we then want to use for mocks. All right, so we don't fail anything. And now let's start the recording, because again, we want to intercept the response that we will get from the API. And now let's call, for example, info about me. Okay, so we get the report. Is my my access? I didn't get the access token. Apologies for that. There you go. We are debugging live. Let me grab a new access token because I closed the terminal, so it wasn't stored. So let me do it again. Let me get an access token. Let me reissue the call. There you go. Okay, so now you've got info about me. Let's do another one. Let's do a call to users. All right, so these calls pass through. Let's stop the recording. And now we've got a brand new mock file with the calls that we've issued. So this is the users, and we've got the users that I've got in my tenant, and then another one me. So this is a response that I've got, and we even have the one call that I failed. It's included there too, and we can remove it or not, like that is up to us. But imagine how cool this is. I haven't typed a character. I just moved through my app, and I was able to create mocks for my app that I can now use and share with everybody on the team. I hope that gives you a good idea of Microsoft 365 Developer Proxy, what it is and what it can do. I would really encourage you to give it a try. It is available at aka.ms/m365/proxy. Give it a try, and don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any feedback, questions, or ideas. Thank you all.